Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Anna. I'm a clinical psychology doctorate student and I make videos about real-world applications to psychology, so hit like and subscribe if you are interested in that type of content. So in this video, I'm going to be doing another psychology of a fictional character, in this case Regina George from Mean Girls. And as always, we can't diagnose people off the internet, we can't diagnose people we don't know. Go watch my video on how to properly diagnose someone if that's something that you're interested in. But I think Regina is a great example for exploring cluster B personality disorders. The cluster B is the dramatic erratic cluster. Particularly because she's not a clear-cut case, so it's a nice exploration of all four of these disorders. Alright, so I'm just going to run through each one of the cluster B personality disorders and kind of look at which criteria she meets and which of the disorders she could technically be diagnosed with. So the first one is Antisocial Personality Disorder, which you may know as psychopathy or sociopathy. They're all names for the same thing. So one of the symptoms is deceitfulness, repeated lying and conning others for personal profit or pleasure. So I definitely think Regina does this. Whether or not it's pathological kind of depends on, knowing more about her, but I think it is pathological because she lies for no reason, not just for her own benefit, just out of the blue. Like when she tells people, I love your skirt, but in reality she hates it. Like she has nothing to gain from that really, except maybe charming people, but I think it is kind of pathological. Irritability and aggressiveness. So arguably so, we see her being aggressive when she finds out she's not invited to Katie's party and that Katie's been trying to fatten her up with these protein bars or whatever. I think she's very socially aggressive, and a lot of times we kind of overlook the more feminine social forms of aggression and just focus on the physical ones. Lack of remorse. So she doesn't seem sorry when she gets called out by the principal for being guilty of many of the same things she's complaining about. So I would argue that she does have lack of remorse in the beginning 3/4 of the movie, but obviously towards the end she develops remorse, which actually is kind of a sign to me that maybe it's not antisocial personality disorder. Another criteria is there has to be evidence of conduct disorder before age 15. So, we don't know this. We would have to speak with her parents about what her behavior was like leading up to age 15. I would guess yes. I mean, this rarely just develops out of the blue, and she's 16 now, so probably she's been like this for a while. So yeah, I think technically she meets the criteria because you need at least 3 of these symptoms to have antisocial personality disorder, and she does have 3 of them. But the lack of remorse one is kind of shaky, so I'm wondering, maybe it's on the cusp, maybe it's not the best disorder to describe her presentation. And character development kind of gets her to be less psychopathic as the movie goes on. And while it's not uncommon for psychopaths to get better with a lot of intensive therapy, and she could be in remission, I think it's kind of uncommon for a teenager going through high school with no therapy to suddenly get better when it comes to psychopathy. So I would argue that she never met the criteria. Then we have borderline personality disorders, which requires at least 5 symptoms. And so the 2 symptoms of borderline that I see her having are inappropriate intense anger or difficulty controlling anger. So initially, yes, she is very angry, such as when she finds out about Katie's plot against her. But then she's able to kind of reel herself in, and instead of acting in an impulsive, reckless way, well, I guess it is reckless for other people's regard, but it's not impulsive and self-destructive. She's able to really think straight and wonder what the best thing is going to be to get back at Katie. The second symptom that she kind of meets the criteria for is a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships. So she does have kind of unstable and intense personal friendships, as well as relationships romantically, but she doesn't really go from idealizing people to devaluing them. I mean, yeah, she's fine at devaluing people, but she doesn't really idealize anyone. And this is called splitting, when someone with borderline personality disorder goes from someone is all good to all bad, or all bad to all good. So I don't think she does splitting. I think she kind of dislikes everyone equally. So clearly it's not borderline personality disorder. Moving on to histrionic personality disorder, which also requires 5 criteria for it to count. Uncomfortable in situations where she's not the center of attention. Yeah, she definitely is the queen bee and wants to be treated as such, and she gets really distressed when Katie sort of takes her throne. Hi, baby. Sexually seductive or provocative behavior. So I think she mostly does this to make Katie uncomfortable with the boyfriend that she wanted. I'm not 100% sure if this would qualify as sexually seductive or provocative, inappropriate behavior, so we'll kind of table that as a sort of. Rapidly shifting and shallow expression of emotions. Yeah, so we see how she goes from, oh my god, I love your skirt, to I really hate that skirt in like a period of a second. So very shallow expression of emotions, very rapidly shifting. Consistently uses physical appearance to draw attention to self. Yeah, so she definitely takes pride in her appearance. She takes care of how she looks and what she's wearing, and she does kind of do it to bring attention to herself as well as to express herself. And normally I would think twice about pathologizing people's expression of how they want to look, but we kind of need to view this in the context of a personality disorder where it's kind of tying into her need for attention. Self-dramatization, theatricality, and exaggerated expression of emotion. Yeah, so she speaks pretty theatrically. She has dramatic pauses and things like that. She definitely knows how to capture people's attention. So yeah, we have 4.5, I would say 4.5 of these criteria, and you need 5. So arguably you could say she meets the criteria for histrionic personality disorder. However, I'm still not convinced that this is the most appropriate diagnosis, so let's keep going. Moving on to narcissistic personality disorder, which also requires 5 or more criteria. Grandiose sense of self-importance. So true. She expects to be treated superior. There's no question about that. Believes that she's special or unique and can only associate with other special or high status people. This is very true. So we see how she definitely thinks she's the queen bee, and she only wants to associate with a few people who she deems worthy of her attention, which are the plastics. Requires excessive admiration. Definitely so. She always needs to be admired by her friends, her classmates, her boyfriends. Has a sense of entitlement. So she definitely expects people to comply with her expectations, such as, you know, the infamous "you can't sit with us" scene where she wants to bend the rules for herself when she was never willing to do that for anyone else. Is interpersonally exploitative. So she takes advantage of others. I definitely think so. I think she takes advantage of Gretchen. She takes advantage of her boyfriend. She kind of takes advantage of everyone in her life. Lacks empathy. I definitely think so, at least until the end of the movie. She doesn't seem to care at all about how her actions affect other people. Is often envious of others or believes that others are envious of her. Yeah, so she thinks everybody is jealous of her, and she becomes jealous of Katie when Katie threatens her. Shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. I definitely think she's arrogant. You know, we see when Katie first walks into her house, she says, "Oh my god, your house is so nice," and she goes, "I know, right?" Not the politest thing to say, you know, pretty haughty, pretty arrogant. So she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of these symptoms for narcissistic personality disorder, and you only need 5 to meet the criteria. So by far, this is the most symptoms that she has for one particular cluster B personality disorder. Even before I went into this, my inkling was, yeah, she's a narcissist. So what would we diagnose her with? Because technically she kind of meets the criteria for 3 of these disorders. And this is not uncommon because, like I mentioned in my Psychology of Michael Scott video, it's quite common to have overlap in personality disorders, especially when they're within the same cluster. So ideally, we would do a psychological evaluation on her, and we would see what she meets the most criteria for. We would go a little bit deeper than just looking at the criteria and her behavior, but kind of getting a sense of who she is in her core. If we're going simply based on numbers, yeah, it's narcissistic personality disorder. However, you can have more than one personality disorder. You know, my feeling even before going into this was that she definitely seems like a narcissist because she kind of has this exploitative nature that narcissists use with other people, and you know that she also uses with the entire school. She's like the queen bee. She's kind of doing narcissistic abuse against everyone. And there's a certain exploitative nature to narcissism that we don't find so much in histrionic or borderline personality disorders. It's definitely there in antisocial personality disorder, but this doesn't feel so much like she needs to tear other people down because she's bored or because she just feels like it. It does feel like she kind of is doing it because she requires that admiration constantly. But she also meets the criteria for antisocial and histrionic personality disorder. So what do we do with that? Well, this is really where it kind of would come up to clinical judgment. You know, there might be some people out there that might diagnose her with all 3. Would that be inaccurate? You know, maybe not, but I think when it gets to 3 personality disorders, that's when it's kind of like you're looking more at the criteria than you are at the person. So I would say she definitely has narcissistic personality disorder, and I would put with histrionic tendencies. someone might diagnose her with both. I think that would be kind of reasonable. We would just need to gather a little more information. So this was a really fun example because I love Mean Girls and because I also love cluster B personality disorders. And this was a great example to see how someone can have overlapping traits from many of these different personality disorders. So leave a comment down below what you think her best diagnosis would be or which ones. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're interested in real-world applications to psychology. And I'll see you tomorrow.